right, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I think Caleb summed it up for you. We're just going to review what happened in 2016 with the data collection and then try and give some sense of where that data is going to go. So this, Caleb, do I need to use these things to get it to pan forward, or am I just not on the slide maybe? There we go. Okay, so this is the presentation overview. First, I want to talk a little bit about mine rescue and the International Mine Rescue Competition itself, show you some of the results, and then talk about potential recommendations that may come out of those results, as well as implications for those recommendations in mining, and then where we might go next. So I just put in a couple of slides to orientate people if you weren't familiar with the mine rescue job occupation. So as most people, particularly in Northern Ontario, know, mining can be a dangerous occupation. There are often mine fires or workers get injured. And in those scenarios, they call in a special team of workers to help out, and that's the mine rescue workers. So the team is made up of usually 6 people. And this picture kind of shows them to you from the background. With the team that goes underground to actually perform the work of the rescue are comprised of the captain, the vice captain, the number 2, number 3, and number 4 people. The captain is essentially the director of the operations. In a typical rescue, the captain is not doing the laborious tasks. The captain is overseeing and giving direction to the other members and being responsible for communicating what's happening underground, above ground, as well as the captain has an important role of monitoring the health of the other people that he or she is with underground. The vice captain will have some sharing roles in terms of leadership with the captain, but typically the vice captain is still doing the primary roles of the other positions, and so these guys are doing the work. So whether it's a casualty that is being managed, or whether there is a job like a fire that needs to be controlled, it's the rest of the team that's doing the majority of that work. The last member of the team is called the briefing officer, and the briefing officer is a little bit special because this person is above ground. They are the point person for the captain, so they're relaying information to the captain. The captain is relaying information about the team to the briefing officer, and the briefing officer is also then relaying information back and forth to things that are going outside of what's happening underground. In Ontario, mine rescue is organized and maintained by a group called Ontario Mine Rescue, which is component of Workplace Safety North. And basically, they are responsible for the training of all mine rescue personnel and the maintenance of all their equipment. And within Ontario, there are 7 districts. There are about 35 underground mines. And so mine rescue workers come from roughly 900 active volunteers from all of the different mines. The mines need to provide a certain number of volunteers from their workforce to act as mine rescue workers. So it's voluntary in the sense that you don't have to do it, but the mine does have to provide a certain number of workers from their workforce, depending on the size of the mine. And so recognizing, I guess, that they are workers at the mine, and this is sort of like a secondary task that they do. Just to give you a sense of how often the teams are called upon, between 2003 and 2014, there's been approximately 44 emergencies per year. So of those 900, that doesn't mean that all of the 900 were actively called out, but roughly 220 are responding to a mine rescue in any given year. So just to say that you have a pretty decent odds of, if you're a mine rescue volunteer, to need to respond to a mine rescue during that year. And the last point here is just really to tie in how CROSH got involved. Ontario Mine Rescue is overseen by a technical advisory committee whose job is basically to continuously assess procedures and practice and to advise to make sure they're attaining best practice. And in 2015, as part of the Mining Health and Safety Prevention Review, one of the recommendations that came out of that was that Ontario Mine Rescue needed to implement a fitness standard. So the Technical Advisory Committee is involved in trying to suss out how to implement that fitness standard. And so that's how the conversation came about with CROSH is there research that we could do to help develop that standard. So having said that, internationally, there's a group called the International Mine Rescue Board. And the International Mine Rescue Board was initiated in 2001, and it actually came about because of a tragedy in Poland in 1998, where a number of Polish mine rescue workers died on a rescue mission, primarily from heat stroke, basically. And obviously that's the worst case scenario, and people were pretty upset when the rescue person ends up dying in the course of the rescue. That's horrible. And so the International Mine Rescue Board was formed to basically try and prevent a tragedy like that from happening again. And what they do is they have members from all of the global mining countries come together to share best practice, basically. And the way they function is they have, every second year they have a conference where they share best practice in a formal setting, and alternating years of the conference they have a mine rescue competition where they physically act out best practice for a different way of sharing. So the different countries that participate on this board have opportunity to host the competition, and in 2016 it was Canada's opportunity, and because Sudbury is awesome home of mining, Sudbury was selected as the home site for the international competition. So that was pretty terrific for us. It gave us a really unique opportunity to look at mine workers from around the world, and Ontario Mine Rescue came and talked to us, and we realized there was a couple of neat opportunities around this particular competition. So the competition itself had 27 teams representing 13 nations, and 5 of those teams were Canadian. What we wanted to do was monitor the rescue workers live to measure their physiological load while they were performing a mine rescue. If you want to develop a fitness standard in Canada, you essentially need to make sure that the standard is a realistic representation of what the worker actually needs to be able to do on their job, right? And so to come up with that kind of standard, you really have to have a strong description of what the job actually entails. Previous research has looked at specific tasks and sort of structured, the way you would do it in an experiment, but no one has measured in an actual mine rescue. And this simulated competition is probably as close as an actual mine rescue you can get without it being a mine rescue. So we thought, we've got new technology that we can actually measure their heart rate and their respiratory rate and that sort of thing. And we've got an opportunity where they're going to do essentially a real mine rescue that we can measure them in. So we, this particular picture, I should stop for a second and say, on the left-hand side, you can see sort of our bare-chested gentleman wearing what's called the EcoVital. This is a body-worn monitor that measures your number of breaths. It measures your heart rate. It measures your heart rate variability, which is basically your little, that the heart rate monitor reads out. It also measures skin temperature. It can tell you the position that the person's in, if they fall, if they lie down, if they sit down. And then on the right-hand side, sort of held in the fingertips there, that's what a core temperature pill looks like. And this is something you would swallow. It measures your internal core temperature in real time. And this little monitor, or this little device, is able to sync up to the heart rate variability body-worn monitor so that they can kind of talk to each other, and they continuously produce data every 15 seconds. Of the, oh, I forget exactly, 100 and, sorry, I can't remember the exact number of people that we had in the team, but we had 76 people willing to participate and wear the heart rate variability monitor during the competition. And of those, people were a little less comfortable swallowing a mechanical capsule for core temperature. And so only 57 people, which was 42% of the population, agreed to swallow the core temperature pill. Now, the ability to do this during the competition did two things. One, it was great for the research group because it allowed us to collect data that had never been collected before. But it also was great for the Ontario Mine Rescue because it introduced a new aspect of technology that is being considered for use in mine rescue work. This body-worn device monitors in real time, and it can relay that data up in real time too. And so for the competition, we actually were able to display, there was an audience sort of watching camera views of what the mine workers were doing underground, and at the same time, the audience could see what the physiological response were of the workers. So this screen just sort of shows you, it's a picture of the screen that the audience was able to see when the competition was going on. So we had, you know, I've cut off who the person was that was wearing it, but you could see each member in the team. It would tell them whether they were upright or not. It was giving you their heart rate at the time, updating every 15 seconds, breathing rate, estimated, oh, sorry, that's actual core temperature because it's from the core temp pill, and also the skin temperature. And this particular system does incorporate an algorithm that indicates if there's, that person is going to have a heat stress event in the next 15 minutes, and that's why you would sort of see the alarms. It would change color. So you can see how this might be valuable in future mine rescue for the briefing officer to have this constant picture of the workers and to sort of relieve the burden of the captain from having to assess the health of the worker nonstop. I'm going to come back to that point. So I want to give you a better sense of what did this competition look like. I said it's as real life as it can be without being a real competition, or sorry, without being a real mine rescue. So a standard mine rescue operation, I understand, takes about 2 hours. It can, in unusual circumstances, they can be allowed to be underground and participating in mine rescue for 4 hours. But typically they don't do that. Typically they're about 2 hours. So this particular simulation was designed to be an approximate 2-hour rescue. And they created 4 tasks to be achieved during that mine rescue. And we sort of broke down the tasks, we call them 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll kind of describe each one. So before they went into the mine, they put on the heart rate variability monitor. 2 hours before they had swallowed the pill, we started monitoring them, and then they went in. The first, and this is a real operational mine in Sudbury. They were driven into it to start, but then they were released and started the activity. So the first thing they had to do was a casualty care. There was an unconscious victim that they had to locate and then provide first aid and take them to a safe space within the mine. The captain is carrying a kestrel and is sort of monitoring the environmental markers throughout. And so you can see at the entry point, dry bulb temperature was about 25.7, humidity was about 72%. The entire time to complete this sort of casualty care cast was 40 minutes. And these photos are taken, as I said, the whole thing was videotaped. They had set up cameras underground, and so they were also able to capture photos of the events. Task 2 was a fire. So after they brought the first casualty to a safe space in the mine, they had to block the smoke. They had to build a barricade, basically, to block the smoke from entering a portion of the tunnel. And they were provided different mediums to do that. It took them, you know, depending on the team, a fairly long time to do this. While this was going on, they were pumping smoke into the area, like they simulated a fire, and they were also pumping heat into the area to simulate the temperature. And so you can see the humidity went down, but the temperatures significantly rose. Task 3 was stressful in a different way. Task 3 was to rescue a second casualty, but this person had fallen from their equipment and impaled themselves on a steel pole. And so the mine rescue workers had to extricate the person from the shaft using pretty heavy tools that they had brought with them. And the victim was, or I shouldn't say victim, the casualty was awake, and so was screaming and actively responding to first aid treatment, which was stressful. I watched it on the video, it was stressful. At this point in the tunnel, though, it leads out to open air, and so there was fresh air coming down at this point, and so you can see the temperature has dropped a bit, although the humidity is quite high. And then the last task we labeled as an arduous labor task, and it was basically exiting the mine. And they had to take the victim or the casualty with them, and they had to basically ascend a fairly steep incline to get out of the mine. So the temperatures were low, but they were pretty pooped at this point. So while they're doing all that, with the heart rate variability monitor, we were measuring their heart rate variability, their respiratory rate, their skin temperature, and their core temperature. Using these things and with software, we were able to also estimate their energy expenditure, their maximal oxygen consumption. I want to stay on time. So I'm just going to go through some of the, not all of the data, but some of the data to highlight the messages here. So we'll start with heart rate, and I also want to take a second to orientate you to the slide. So if you look across the x-axis here, you can see it says task 1, 2, 3, 4. So in those 4 pictures, I explained task 1 was casualty, task 2 was an arduous labor task, that was the fire, right? Task 3 was casualty care, and task 4 was an arduous labor. Obviously on the y-axis here is their heart rate in beats per minute. And then this particular graph has broken down the data by position on the team. And because the captain has a more specialized role, we really sort of highlighted the captain separately in white. And then this is the vice captain, number 2, number 3, number 4. So you can, the black line across here is the average heart rate for the group at 143 beats per minute. And the red line is the average max heart rate for the group. And so you can see that they're working, their heart rate is getting very high. And in fact, a number of, well, I'll have this in the summary piece, but particularly in task 4, where they were going up that steep ramp, they were working at or above 100% of their max heart rate. At the same time, if we look at their core temperature measures, it's also a little bit worrisome. So same slide information here. The yellow line is highlighting 38 degrees. And this is where we would say that a person is starting to be affected by the temperature. And so typically in the literature, you would read that at 38 degrees, decision-making is impaired, right? You might also read things like the person starts to feel a little less concerned, a little detached emotionally, right? They're starting to feel fatigued. So 38 degrees, some of those people are hitting 38 degrees in task 1. And I didn't say this, but I think it was obvious in the picture. You can kind of see that. They're underground, but they're also wearing the PPE. They're under the breathing apparatus. They're carrying heavy equipment, and they're doing tasks that require physical activity, right? 39 degrees is when heat stroke can start to set in. Or sorry, not heat stroke, heat exhaustion, right? And you can see that some of the workers are reaching that in task 2, certainly by task 4. And 40 degrees is sort of the definition for heat stroke. And there was one person that reached 39.8 degrees during the event. Simulation. We also estimated their energy expenditure and their VO2 mean to give you a sense of how hard they're working. And if I kind of look at about 12 to 13 kilocalories, so sorry, I should orientate you to the slide again. So this is by task alone, grouping all of the people together, not looking at specific positions. And in the y-axis, we've got kilocalories burnt per minute. And so, at this level, that's like you running full out on your treadmill, or a hockey player skating all out. This is vigorous intensity. If I look at the VO2 max, basically it's trying to give you a sense of their average max was around 42 mils per kilogram per minute. So in the casualty care, they're working at about 50% of their maximum. And actually this slide almost shows it better. Depending on the position, the captain is working at about 50% of their maximum for the 2 hours. The other positions are working at between 60 to 80% of their maximum for the 2 hours, which is, that's hard work, right? Heavy work. Okay, so a couple of basic conclusions. All tasks require physical efforts. Just basing it on their percent age predicted maximum heart rate, where you were looking at 70 to 87% predicted max heart rate. Arduous labor was certainly more demanding than the casualty care, but the problem is that the casualty care, because they were kind of happening in a sequenced manner, and casualty care still required physical activity associated with it, they weren't getting a rest time either, right? So you typically saw sort of a upward swing in results, because even after they finished a task, they didn't truly get to rest before they had another task to do. Interestingly, or not interestingly, I guess not unexpectedly, captains were lower for all reasons. But it becomes tricky in interpretation how you want to apply that. Because technically, especially in a competition, captains are not supposed to do any of the components of labor, and they lose points from the judges if they do that. But in a real mine rescue situation, they, particularly if need is there, they will step in and help. And so, something to consider. And certainly heat strain, it was obvious to me that there was heat strain. All positions saw an increase in core temperature with a mean of 38.3. So, of note, a couple of extra points. 37 or 50% of participants elicited 100% of their age predicted maximum heart rate or above. So at some point during the competition, almost everybody hit their maximum heart rate. I say that like if I was doing an ethics application to put somebody to do a VO2 max test on them, there is a risk that when you push somebody really hard under those circumstances that they may have a cardiac event, right? So it's considered dangerous. It's considered something that we wouldn't do, and particularly in an untrained individual. So the fact that they're hitting these high levels, you know, is an important thing to take into consideration when you're talking about a fitness standard. The captain did, none of the captains that participated exceeded a core temperature of 39. 17 of the participants reported a peak core at 39 or above. 3 participants reported a core temp that exceeded 39.5, and 1 participant registered, as I said earlier, at 39.88. So, in kind of trying to, you know, think about that, and I think we're still, I put in brackets around recommendations and process. We're still trying to unpackage this, because in understanding that it's a really demanding job, at the same time, we have to deal with the practical implications that are in play, right? So I think we all agree that yes, a fitness standard needs to be implemented. The trick is, what does that fitness standard need to look like? Australia has certainly put into play a fitness standard that is largely based on aerobic fitness and sort of set a maximum VO2 or mils of oxygen that they need to achieve based on age and gender. But looking at our data, I would say our workers probably would be able to pass that test. Maybe not all of them, but the majority of them would. But I don't know that that would actually protect them. And certainly if you look at the Australian mining population, they have that standard in play, and yet their fitness is sort of average population fitness. Like I don't know that it has made them a meaningfully more safe mine rescue group. So I do think part of the fitness standard has to include an aerobic component, and maybe an aerobic, like a VO2 max test would be a good sort of starting point, but I really think more realistically, it needs to be a regular program of fitness that the workers have to adhere to year long, knowing that they're going to go in to a high percent max exertion at any point. They need to be prepared for that physically at any point. And really, if I start talking about the heat strain, there's really only, well, there's 3 things that will impact heat strain. The first is your aerobic fitness. So if we can get them more continuously fit, that may protect them against, the literature shows it should protect them against heat strain. Number 2 is how much excess fat are they carrying, because that's going to impact heat exchange, right? And, you know, I actually have a slide that highlights this right here. We look at, where did it go? We look at the BMI of the group, you know, and I saw the participants. You could argue that their BMI is borderline high because they're super buff, and some of them are, but some of them are carrying extra weight. And so again, I think a regular fitness practice would help manage that component. And the third thing around heat stress is acclimatization, which I'll stick a pin in for a second and talk about that separately. The other thing that I would toss around a fitness standard here is, should the captains have a lower standard? And I think in the long run, my answer is no, but we might want to have a 5-year phase-in, because the captains are our most experienced group. And if you knock out all the experienced people with too big of a change, you will impact the team in another way. I do think in terms of implications for mining, having a fitter or having a fitness program that increased the fitness of your mine rescue volunteers would have a positive trickle-down effect on the larger organization. I know there's going to be pushback. I think there's strategies around it that could be, you know, brainstormed and tried out. But there are lots of issues around health and wellness in the mining organization themselves that we know fitness would help mitigate. And so if you go back to that slide where I said how many people come from each mine, we could have a larger impact, both in a negative way in terms of procedures, regulations, and all that, but also in a positive way in terms of overall health and well-being. I know I'm almost out of time, so I'll try and wrap up quickly. This was not a recommendation that came out of the fitness piece, but I think it's pretty clear that real-time monitoring of mine rescue workers should be implemented as a regular practice. Trying to look in somebody's face who has a mask on in a hot environment as the captain and say, "Hey, Stephen, you feeling okay? You good to continue?" And you're like, "Well, crap, we got to go rescue, Betty. So yeah, I'm ready to continue." I don't know that that's a physical check-in from the captain. It puts a lot of pressure on the captain, puts a lot of pressure on the team, and I don't think it's the best way to safely monitor people in scenarios that we know are high risk. I think in this scenario, real-time monitoring is a new best practice, and I think we will see that. In terms of how that, I think that will also have larger implications on the mining organization, right? First and foremost, who's going to hold the data? I would suggest Ontario Mine Rescue, but I still think there's going to have to be policy and practice that's worked out about that, right? If you're a mine rescue worker and I have all of your mine rescue data, what do I do with that data? Nothing? Anything? Share it with your your family physician to give you a WSIB claim? I don't know. There's going to be implications of this data that has to be managed. I also think that as people become comfortable wearing these technologies, they may want to or be comfortable wearing them in other mining scenarios. So there are lots of hot work that is task specific for mining. Should we be monitoring, in those scenarios too? And then my other recommendation is that, wow, and I kick myself that we didn't do this at the competition. We should have been asking every single person that came out of that mine questions around their heat, the presence of heat illness. I think that they were experiencing it. I think there were signs and symptoms. I think they should have been better managed post. I think nobody bought, there's emergency personnel in place, don't get me wrong, but people didn't say, and then they went away. And so I think another procedure needs to be put in place to automatically, we need to develop the screening process for it, and then we need to automatically screen every single mine rescue worker that comes out of a rescue operation for the presence of heat illness. And so the last point around that is just around, everybody wants the workers to be acclimatized to protect them from heat stress. Having talked to the people that participated in it, nobody felt that they were acclimatized despite working in mine, because you lose acclimatization so quickly, like within days after coming out of a regular, 5 days, right? And so if mines want to go in this route, they are really going to have to purposefully set up a schedule that does that kind of acclimatization. And I think there will be more pushback on that actually than there will be on a fitness standard. And so I think it's possible. I don't think it's practical. I do think screening for heat strain should be considered for the larger mining organization once we've got it down for mine rescue as well, recognizing, as Dom's presentation was a couple weeks ago now, heat strain has long-term effects, right? We're missing it. And then lastly, I think now we can sort of say we've done a component of the field piece. I think we need to come up with a fitness program now. And if there's buy-in from the organization, we need to evaluate that fitness program. And I'll just quickly acknowledge, could not have done this work without lots of people from Ontario Mine Rescue, but in particular, Ted Hanley, Sean Rideout, Tim Ebbinghaus. Certainly, we could not have done the data collection that day without NORCAT. They were a huge help in getting the system viewing live. Particular Sean Poplinski and Ed Wisnicki. Certainly, there were a number of graduate students involved in the project and the data collection. Justin Conrad, it was his thesis, but on the week of and before, Brandon Vance, Emily Jago, Jordan Nixon all helped us get the data, and of course, all of the mine rescue participants for being willing to wear the equipment during the competition. Thanks for listening. Sorry, I said 3 minutes.
Still have time for a few questions.
Uh-oh.
Dominique.
He said, hey.
Representation, thank you very much. The one part that I'm not sure we chatted about was the fact that there are some governing bodies that oversee occupations in the heat that have a threshold that was published in 38.5. Now, based on the data that we saw, those guys essentially after the first task and maybe the second task, they've been told to stop a lot of money.
Yeah.
Consequently, as part of the recommendations, we had a chat at some point of just maybe increasing the number of active rescue personnel on site per number of miners, so that maybe there can be a shift in teams as opposed to just making the assumption you have to do the full rescue from beginning to end, it may take you 2 hours, or you have more active individuals nearby that can actually take over.
So, Sandra, can you just repeat it so that everyone online, or summarize it, what Dawn is asking? So everyone can...
Okay, I hope I can summarize it, because I do think I missed one sentence there. Basically, Dom said there are governing bodies that would recommend that work stoppage occur at 38.5. And so if we were live monitoring these workers, it would have been registered, right? And we would have had to enforce a stop workage, which was one of the things that we tackled for the actual competition. There was concern that the data was going to cause a stop in competition. That's another story. And so the suggestion, I think, is if we had multiple teams in place to switch them out. The challenge with that, because they do have backup teams to do just that, especially, you know, if something happens, it's called to a stop and they're pulled out. The challenge is often how long it takes them to actually get there. And so 2 pieces to that. One, even if you called it and said, okay, we've got to pull them out. We've still got a time period now where they have to get back out, which may be extensive. And the risk in there that is obviously the careful decision making, and I don't pretend to speak for Ontario Mine Rescue, Workplace Safety North, or the decisions that they make, but I know that the mine rescue workers, they're priority number 1. But if you're trying to achieve something underground, that how long it takes you to get there has to be played into it. And then estimating how long it's going to take to achieve that goal, that's absolutely going to be one of the challenges for live monitoring. And so I think it's going to have to be much more stickier than a number that says stop. It's going to have to be a better look at where the individual is at. And okay, that's you.
Can I just follow up on that? I'm just work stoppage. I wonder how that would apply to other environments that are experiencing fire control. Maybe they hope higher temperatures. Would they still be required to stop the rescue? Because
none of them are being monitored, though, right? And so they are. I mean, that's an occupation where they have those kinds of injuries and reports annually, right? But they're relying on education, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but they're relying on educating their workers about the signs of heat illness and heat exhaustion, and recognizing it either in somebody else or in yourself to then step back and manage it. They're not measuring it specifically. They're estimating it. I mean, you can estimate, certainly taking the environmental temperature and humidity and sort of calculating how long a person can work at a given activity under those conditions. They do that, right? And so they will say, okay, you can only do this task for 15 minutes and you have to take a break, because they're assuming that under that time in that environment, you're going to be hitting 38.5 and coming out. So that's really the two ways they currently manage it. It's gonna. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you know this answer or not, but there's a piggyback part that is an opinion question. So in Australia, they have a fitness standard for mine rescue workers. Is that fitness standard administered by the individual mine locations, or is it by their mine rescue governing body, or is it by a third party, an independent organization? And then I guess the follow-up then is, where's your gut going with, in terms of an Ontario fitness standard? Would it be housed internally by and administered by Ontario Mine Rescue, or would you suggest an independent certified body to administer that test and certify individuals pass, or would you leave it up to the individual mines to make sure that they can have a certain number of miners trained for mine rescue that pass the test?
Okay, so you reminded me of something else. So I'll start with, I don't know, and I can guess, but I don't want to say without
Certainty, who is tracking in Australia. I should add that one of the things that Ontario Mine Rescue currently does and is responsible for, and that I would strongly recommend they continue to do based on this, and based on sort of the Supreme Court recommendations on implementing the fitness standard, one of the things is that they regularly practice pretend mine rescues, where the people do the actual components of the job that they're supposed to do to show that they're capable of doing it, right? And mine rescue does that through training and district and provincial competitions and beyond, right? And so one of the tests that you would have to go through before you could become a true mine rescue worker is to actually put on all of the PPE and perform the actual mine rescue tests, or tasks, I should say, successfully, right? So that's a critical component of a fitness test, because even if you were able to be, if you were super aerobically fit, but you can't breathe under, then you're not going to be a mine rescue worker, right? So mine rescue currently maintains that data. My gut on it is that they are the right people to be in charge of administering the fitness test. But given that if I could design it and have it my way, I would require there to be regular fitness training of the individuals. There might need to be more participation or somehow tracking of that with the workplace. So I still think OMR should mine it. I don't think that it's required for another body to take over, but I'm not an expert in that. That's my opinion.
And the standard in Australia, I understand it, is one threshold across the country. There is one fitness requirement, right? I guess I could distill it down to that. It doesn't differ by underground mines or depths or anything. It's one across the blanket mine standard for
like Czechoslovakia, or shouldn't say Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. Oh, I know, I'm so old hockey still. They require a monthly fitness check, right? Which is a different way of approaching it. If you have to sort of pass that fitness test on a monthly basis, you're more likely to be maintaining your fitness, right? And I mean, I liken it to the fire ranger stuff that we've been doing, right? The fire ranger literature had originally shown, they had a fitness test mandated, or that came into play in 2013. they would come into the season super fit because they had to pass the fitness test. And then over the fire season, their fitness would deteriorate because they weren't maintaining it. So currently, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry have implemented a fitness program that is required. So if you're at the base, you work out for an hour that day, right? And Caleb's research has shown that in implementing that, they have maintained their fitness over the season, right? And so I don't know if Mine Rescue wants to do a monthly fitness test, but that would be another way to approach it, where you would have to pass it more regularly, and therefore the onus maybe would fall back more on the worker to maintain their fitness to achieve that.
So
We're out of
There's
time.
a question, one quick question from one person online, just asking about where the results of the study will be made available and or circulated in
Great
terms of
question.
a report or journal article or this webinar, for example. So I can answer the first part is that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website. Also, the master student that Sandra alluded to, Justin Conrad, recently defended his master's thesis work on this project. That was also recorded and can be archived on our website. So as far as that viewing, but in terms of a report, I'll let you, or article, Sandra, I'll let you answer that portion.
So,
Yes, I'm currently working on the manuscript. I'm hoping to submit it for peer-reviewed publication by the end of this month. But that's sort of the extended version. I think there still needs to be some more conversations with Ontario Mine Rescue before we get sort of an agreed upon long-term development. Caleb and I are working on sort of a shorter, probably 2-page little report that will summarize the results from this without really the fitness implications yet. And that will also be coming up probably, I'm going to say 2 months,
within
within the next 2 months.